Okay, morning coaches. Welcome to another Monday morning. Today we have a Motivational Monday talk by experienced sports psychologist Sanjana Kiran. Today she'll be speaking about athlete psychological safety. Right, before we start this workshop, just to let you know, housekeeping matters. We have muted your mic. However, we strongly encourage you to still raise your questions and comments via the Zoom chat box. And also switch on your cam, so for better engagement between the presenter and yourself. Okay, as mentioned, today's workshop is about athlete psychological safety, which Sanjana will explain to you in a while. So Sanjana herself is a senior sports psychologist with about 20 years of experience working with high performance athletes. So without further ado, Sanjana, we'll hand over you to you. Okay, Sanjana, please.
Thank you. Do you need me to share my slides?
Yes, please.
Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. It took a little bit to share my screen. I trust you're all doing well. This morning, I want to share with you something that I've understood over the duration of my work with athletes, right from beginners to Olympians, from Singapore and 6 other nations. So, athlete psychological safety is very close to my heart. And I've seen how it can impact positively and negatively on an athlete's mental well-being, but more importantly, performance. So recently, Michael Phelps and many other Olympians in the past 2-3 years have come forward to talk about the challenges with mental illnesses. What they have felt is if their experiences through their sporting journeys were a little different, perhaps they wouldn't be experiencing the intensity of mental illnesses they have. Now, when we talk about mental illnesses, most of them have a genetic background to it, and it's tough to tell which of the athletes have it or carry those genes and which of those don't have the disposition. So it makes sense to ensure that the impact of training and competition is less traumatic for all the athletes, irrespective, such that those who are predisposed to it might not have to experience a very intense outburst of the mental illnesses. Now, when we listen to the stories of these athletes, you must watch this movie, the documentary, The Weight of Gold. So there you would see that these athletes who had, sacrificed, dedicated their childhood, their youth to pursue their passion, to pursue their goal of being an Olympian, did not enjoy much the actual moment of being that Olympian or reaching their goal. That joy was short-lived. And that is what actually got them thinking into why they're feeling the way they're feeling. Why, when they're supposed to be feeling elated and excited throughout after that, that excitement and elation seem to have died. Why are they experiencing this emptiness, after achieving so much? And why is there such a huge struggle to get back to form when after earning an Olympic gold, they should be at that level and beyond. And through my intimate conversations with athletes, which have been very privileged to have as a sports psychologist of all levels, what I've understood is as much as these athletes are super passionate about what they want, super passionate about sports, and that is what gets them to wake up like at a 4 a.m. and do training as much as they don't want to wake up at that time. Trainings and competitions are very, very traumatic. Now, the general thinking is that competitions can be very stressful, trainings might not be as stressful. In fact, they're almost equal, or you could say that trainings can be more traumatic than a competition itself. And this is because training is a time when the athletes are comparing themselves to the goal or mark or opponents they want to outdo and outshine. Trainings are when they have to take in so much of information, process that information. Training is when they have to recall the information they already have. Training is when they're supposed to learn, grow every single time. In other words, training.
Sanjana,
Yeah.
your voice sometimes breaks up. Is it
How
because of
about
your
now?
audio? Just now it was like breaking intermittently.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, maybe you can hold your this
Yeah.
closer to your mouth. Yeah, I
Is
think
that better?
yeah,
Okay.
much better. Yes, okay, thanks.
Yeah. So as I was saying, the trainings can be super traumatic. So through my conversations with these athletes is what I understood that athletes, of course, need to work on being self-aware of what they need and how to take care of themselves. Athletes, of course, need to work on being mentally resilient, mentally strong to be able to manage the stresses of training and competition. But as a sports ecosystem, there is something we can do that can take away some of that burden from the athlete. And coaches are a super important part of the sports ecosystem. So with that, I would like to begin this conversation. So roughly the 4 objectives we want to achieve for these conversations. So after this workshop, I want to leave you with the understanding of what psychological safety is, athlete psychological safety. I want to leave you with an understanding of why athlete psychological safety is important. I also want to leave you with an understanding of why coaches can be very responsible for an athlete's psychological safety, and also what are some ways coaches can make an athlete feel psychologically safe through their time with the coaches. So what exactly is athlete psychological safety? Now, before we go into that, we need to understand this terminology, psychological safety. So psychological safety is a term and an area of psychology that is predominantly used in organizational psychology, industrial psychology. So the conversation is about how to keep personnel in an organization psychologically safe from, the management, from the co-workers, and such that they're able to be more productive. Now, the concept of athlete psychological safety, which I've come up with, is something I've borrowed from organizational psychology. So Khan is the first person who kind of started the psychological safety movement for organizational personnel. So Khan says that psychological safety is being able to show and employ oneself without fear of negative consequences to the self-image of that person, the status of that person, or the career of the person. In other words, psychological safety is feeling psychological safety is about being able to be oneself, right? Edmondson feels that a psychological safe team is a team that is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Interpersonal risk-taking suggests that when you have conversations with people around you, with people who matter to you, when you have productive confrontations with them, you want to be able to do that without the fear of being judged, without the fear of being taken wrongly. Clark says that psychological safety is about removing fear from human interaction, right? And replacing that with respect and permission. Now, allowing someone to be psychologically safe does not mean that you allow them to belittle you, you allow them to be rude to you, right? You respect them enough to listen to what they have to say, but with your permission and with politeness. However, it's super important for anyone who's having this conversation with you or communicating with you to feel psychologically safe. Most recently, in March 2020, Clark felt that there are 4 stages to psychological safety. One is to feel included, that follows feeling safe to learn, that follows feeling safe to contribute, and that follows feeling safe to challenge the status quo. So all of this without fear of being embarrassed, being marginalized, being punished in any way. So that much from organizational psychology. So like I said, through my experiences, I felt that athletes do go through that feelings of psychologically unsafe from beginners to Olympians that days. And this is where I thought, this conversation about athlete psychological safety and realms of sports is super important. Now, based on these various explanations and my work as a sports psychologist, I feel that athlete psychological safety has 3 tenets to it. One is to feel safe in the personal risk taking between the sports ecosystem. And when I say sports ecosystem, we are talking about close friends, parents, coaches, sports science staff, sports medicine staff, support staff, administrators, governance, all of that. So an athlete should feel safe for interpersonal risk taking with the entire sports ecosystem. And because this is Motivational Mondays for coaches, I direct my conversation to the coaches. Second is to feel respected. And third and most important is to feel accepted. So let's move further to understand why athlete psychological safety is important. Now, when there is lack of psychological safety, or in other words, a psychologically unsafe athlete feels stifled, feels silenced. So the athlete mostly behaves because of compliance, not because that is how they want to behave. So it comes from a place of fear. Now, when athletes are motivated to train and want to share an idea for improving performance, they frequently do not speak up because they fear that they'll be harshly judged, right? So when athletes are psychologically safe, or when psychological safety is present around the athletes think less about the potential negative consequences of expressing a new or a different idea than they would otherwise. And as a result of it, athletes are able to speak freely. They speak up more, they share ideas, and together, the coach and the athlete or whoever they're discussing with can come up with more productive ways on how they can improve their performance.
Sanjana, yeah,
Yeah.
another suggestion. Okay, maybe you could just unplug your this mic and then just use the built-in mic in your laptop because your voice is still breaking up from time to time. Yeah, you want to
Oh,
try it? Yeah.
yeah.
Are you able to hear now?
Yeah, quite loud. Maybe you want to carry on using this
Sure,
method.
I'll do
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry about that.
Okay. Thanks.
So I was talking about, So I was talking about how athletes can feel stifled and silenced, and how they behave strictly on compliance. Now, what this can do is when the conversations are limited, when there's feeling of being stifled, silenced, and when the behavior is purely due to compliance, they do not reach the full potential. They do not reach it because they're unable to do, they're unable to grow to what they actually can. And this can mean that there are limitations of them achieving a peak performance. So what exactly is peak performance? Peak performance, the definition for peak performance is that it's a magical moment when an athlete puts it all together, both physically and mentally. It's an experience when the mind and body cannot be separated. And this allows the individual to use the full potential. Peak performance is also seen as superior functioning, where athletes are very fully focused, where there is a lack of concern about outcome, which means they're not stressed, where the performance is effortless, the performance is consistent, where the athlete feels very confident. And when that happens, the best performance of the athlete shows, right? And this is also when the athletes experience a state of flow, where things seem to happen on a autopilot, where they don't have to put effort, but the mind takes over the body, right? And all this can happen when the athlete feels psychologically safe, when the athlete is able to grow, develop, feel free. Now, we can't expect an athlete to feel free, be the best, feel full of self-efficacy, feel full of self-confidence during competition when we have not allowed that feeling during training. Because training is a time when athletes train, we all know that, when they train more and more such that their muscle memory, their mental blueprint becomes so clear and so deep that during competition, they should allow them to do their best. And for that to happen, this needs to be allowed during the training session. So this is also why it is super important to make an athlete feel psychologically safe during training if they were to feel confident enough to enter their zone of optimal functioning, but experience that flow to be able to experience the peak performance. Another most important point to note that athlete psychological safety could be one of the major reasons why we see a lot of athletes dropping out at the developmental stage itself. Now, typically, an athlete goes through 3 stages. There's initiation stage, which is around 0 to 12 to 13 years of age, where the talent is being identified, athlete is having good experience in different sports, and gets to shine in a particular sport. And from here on, the athlete moves to the developmental stage or the intermediate stage, where what they once enjoyed has become much more serious. They're being judged during training, they're being judged during competition, but the athletes are still passionate. So this is a key time in the growth and development of an athlete where we want to ensure athletes feel psychologically safe. Because when the athlete does not feel psychologically safe, they feel less of themselves. And this impacts their self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a belief you have in your ability. This impacts their self-confidence. Self-confidence is the belief that you can carry out an activity successfully to the best of your ability. So when an athlete does not trust their ability, how can we expect them to feel confident to use that ability to be their best during competition, right? Now, also to remember that athletes at the developmental stage experience a lot of trauma during training. So what was very happy-go-lucky in the initiation stage, what was fun, what was like winning every competition there is, suddenly has now become very serious. The trainings have become very focused, the trainings have become more enhanced, competition outcomes have become very serious and very, very meaningful. Not just for the people around the athlete, but for the athlete themselves. And then through this developmental period, which is say about between 12 and 13 to all the way up to 20 and 21, there's a lot of physical changes an athlete is going through. And for one, there's puberty they need to deal with. And that brings a myriad of, changes mentally, physically, psychologically, physiologically for the athlete. So they now have to deal with that, and they also have to deal with the trauma of training. And research has it that most mental illnesses start showing from the ages between 15 to all the way 25 and 30. And this is a very crucial period that the athletes do not have to experience additional stress from the sports ecosystem, because already there's so much going on with their passion for the sport, right? And when an athlete's confidence gets impacted around the developmental stage, when the self-efficacy gets impacted, more than often we see that athletes assume that they are not good enough, that they do not have what it takes. And this is also a period where we see a lot of dropouts, a lot of athletes burning out. When this is the period where they should be, wanting to make it big, wanting to shine. Yeah. So feeling psychologically unsafe can restrict those experiences for these athletes, right? Moving further, this can have an impact on their overall mental health, right? Very recently, for the past 2 years, even IOC, International Olympic Council, has been talking about mental health and its importance. And I think it's important for us, the sports ecosystem, to also do what we need to do towards it. Now, a psychologically unsafe environment or experience for the athlete also means that it can lead to mental injuries that I was mentioning further: low self-efficacy, low self-confidence, low self-esteem, valuing oneself less, can have a lasting impression on the mind of an athlete. If physical injuries happen, it's so much more easier to treat it. You need medication, you might have surgery, you might have to go through a rehab, taken care of. Mental injuries happen. More than often, they don't show, we are unable to see. Only, in most cases, only experts are able to pick up injuries. And the major issue with sports performance is that any negative experience, psychologically and athletic experiences, it is attributed to the performance of the athlete. It's attributed to coming from sports. Therefore, to pick up on mental illness in an athlete can be very tricky. Even for me as a clinical psychologist, it's not very easy to pick it up just like that. I need conversations to understand. So mental injuries can be an outcome of not feeling psychologically safe. Poor performance, like I told you earlier. Now, there is no way that an athlete can feel psychologically unsafe and be their best. Now, an athlete's brain or anyone's brain has a certain limit to its processing efficiency. There's already a lot that brain processes for the athlete, related to their mental strength, related to the physical aspect, technical aspect, tactical aspect, and having to go through the kind of training, the competitions, the logistics, and all of that. Additionally, especially for Singapore athletes, they either have jobs which come with their own challenges, and also perhaps along with sports, they're being a student too. So while they're cruising through all this, the brain is already processing a lot of information. So feeling psychologically unsafe means there's a lot more worry and concern being processed. And that can take away from the efficient and effective processing of information in the brain, because there's just so much noise that's created when not feeling psychologically safe. Like I mentioned earlier, going through the ups is a possibility. Physical injuries are possible too. So when an athlete is stressed, physiologically and physically, they get impacted too. Their muscles are tight, their respiratory rate is heightened, their breathing rate is heightened, their focus is not there, because they're distracted with their own negative self-talk. And when all of this happens, this is a good recipe for physical injuries to happen because they're not attending to the task relevant cues as much as they would want to attend to because of the noise in their head and the stress they're going through. And the tight muscles add more, problem to the existing big problem. So all of these can lead the athlete to incur physical injuries or due to stress. Sleeping disorders. There's so much information for the athlete to process. When there's so many unanswered questions, when there's that feeling of unsafety, that feeling of fear, that discomfort, this can trigger the brain to get on an overdrive. So physically, after training and after a long day, the athlete's body is ready to rest. But the mind does not allow them to slow down. And this can cause a lot of sleeping disorders, right? Anxiety and depression. Now, when we talk about anxiety and depression, we need to understand, we talk about anxiety and depression, which is situational. Are we trying to talk about anxiety and depression that is clinical? Here I'm talking about both, right? And more importantly, since we're talking about mental health, the clinical anxiety and depression. So something that is a dispositional aspect to them doesn't have to show, but might show up very early in the life because there's so much stress going on. So by keeping our athletes psychologically safe, we can actually delay the onset of mental illnesses or perhaps not have them show in the first place. Eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia. So now when I talk about eating disorders here, I'm not talking about eating disorders as a result of the sport itself. Like for example, eating disorders in gymnasts because they have to keep a certain frame of body and weight, or any sport like boxing, where there is a weight category. So there is quite a bit of prevalence of eating disorders in those population of athletes. I'm referring to eating disorders as a result of stress, as a result of trauma, as a result of post-trauma. So psychologically, unsafety can lead to eating disorders, right? Substance abuse. Now, when I talk about substance abuse, I'm not talking about drugs to enhance performance. Here I'm talking about abusing substances, maybe like smoking more, or drinking alcohol, or engaging in street drugs to manage their anxiety and depression. So all of this can be reduced, if not completely taken away. All of this can be greatly reduced if we can provide that psychological safety for the athlete. When I see a sports ecosystem, and particularly today, I'm talking about the coaches. So why is the coach responsible for the athlete's psychological safety? That's a big question. So the coach is a bridge between the rest of the sports ecosystem and the athlete. So no matter how the rest of the sports ecosystem treats the athlete, the coach can be that protective gear for the athlete. And also because the athlete is the bridge between the coach and competition outcomes. Let's face it, competitive sports is about medals. It's about competition outcomes. If there are no good competition outcomes, then there are no jobs for coaches. It's as simple as that. So if coaches want these competition outcomes from the athletes, they need to ensure that the athletes feel psychologically safe. They feel mentally well. Because effective and efficient coaching means a psychologically safe athlete. And a psychologically safe athlete means being able to be the personal best during competitions. Also noting that the coaches are the most intimate, the most proximal in terms of emotional and psychological impact for the athlete. And the athletes share that intimacy and that proximity with the coaches throughout their sporting journeys, right? And therefore, a coach's behavior, how a coach makes them feel psychologically safe or unsafe, has very big impact on the athlete. And that is why I believe the coaches are the most responsible compared to every other psychological, sports ecosystem there is. Moving forward, so what exactly makes an athlete psychologically safe? Three things: make them feel safe for interpersonal risk-taking, make them feel accepted as a critical part of the ecosystem, and make them feel respected. So how does a coach go about doing these three things for the athlete? In other words, in what ways does the coach make an athlete feel psychologically safe? Now, high performance or any performance at any level is athlete-centered but coach-led. So coach is the leader, right? And as a leader, coach can ensure that the athletes don't fear the negative consequences of their self-image, status, or career owing to interpersonal risk-taking, right? Therefore, the coach can ensure that the sports ecosystem is safe for interpersonal risk-taking for the athlete. The coach can ensure that the athletes feel accepted as an integral part of the sports ecosystem. And finally, the coach can ensure that the athletes feel respected. So let's discuss about what are some ways. There are not many ways. I'm sure most of us are doing some of this. Most of us are doing some of this perhaps not in the best way, but the intention is there, right? So I'm just putting down a few things which I saw as a common thread all the athletes that work with till now. So in what ways can a coach ensure that the sports ecosystem is safe for interpersonal risk-taking? First, effective communication. Now, if you've been to a level 1 CoachSG coach certification, you see that communication and relationship building is one of the modules. So in the part where we discuss about effective communication, we understood that there are two most important parts of it. One, to be able to listen, and two, to be able to communicate clearly. So listening is the most impactful to make an athlete feel psychologically safe. It's okay if you don't agree to what you are listening to. That can be discussed. But give your athlete that listening ear. Tells your athlete that you are safe for the athlete to take that interpersonal risk. Second, keeping confidentiality of all that the athlete tells you, especially the personal information. So a coach needs to convince the athlete that whatever the athlete shares, the personal stuff, is safe with them, it's confidential. When that happens, the athlete can freely share with you whatever deep fears they might have, whatever concerns they might have, without the fear of being judged as well. Which is the third most important point. Do not judge your athlete. Not judge your athlete as good athlete, bad athlete, talented, not so talented, forthcoming, not so forthcoming, passionate, not passionate. Treat every athlete as an individual, as an athlete. And always remember, an athlete is a human first, athlete next. So if a coach does not make that athlete feel that way, athletes forget that they're human first and athlete next. And they start drawing their major self-identity for sports as an athlete. And when the curtains go down, they find themselves very lonely, very helpless, with no identity of their own. So by not judging the athletes, the coach can do so much for the athlete. And mind you, irrespective of whether an athlete tells you verbally or non-verbally that they're listening to you, and it's impacting them. It is impacting them, especially in today's generation. The millennials and below them, they're not very expressive. Their faces are not very expressive. Their body language is not very expressive. But that doesn't mean that they're not, getting impacted by what they're saying or how they're behaving. So keep it effective, the communication aspect, keeping confidentiality and not judging the athlete can ensure that the athlete feels safe in the personal risk-taking. In what ways can a coach ensure an athlete feel accepted? Refraining from biasness, being biased during sessions, being biased during training, because the athletes get. So be very, very honest when you work with an athlete, including athletes in goal setting process. When we talk about yes, that is not it. But when we talk about developmental athletes, in the good intention to do the best for the athletes, the coaches might not see the need of including the athlete in the goal setting process. It is so important that athletes are included in the goal setting process. Like you mentioned before, coaches do not have to accept a little input the athlete brings, but by including them in that discussion, they can feel accepted. Involving athletes in decision-making processes, like what needs to be done for the training, what are some things that can be done differently, or give athletes opportunities to design a training program on that particular day. So these are some ways you can make the athlete feel accepted. Being open to feedback from athletes. Again, that is not implying that you accept everything the athlete is saying, but be open to it. When you're open to feedback, perhaps you will see that there could be something that can help you make amendments to what you're doing that can be more beneficial for the athlete. But whether you do that or not, just be open to feedback makes an athlete feel accepted. Last but not least, how to make an athlete feel respected. Do not gossip. You might not be doing it intentionally, you might be just sharing it with a fellow coach. But when you do that, the athlete feels disrespect. And you must share information about the athlete. It is good if the athlete knows about it. But if you feel this is a young athlete, you don't want them to know about it, then do it at a time and place where the athlete is not around. Our feedback. Give positive feedback anytime, but when it's negative feedback, as much as possible, give it individually. This tells the athlete that you care for their respect. Consider suggestions of athletes. Sometimes, even if you're not completely sold to that idea, try it. Sometimes by trying the idea they give you and failing at it, of course, we'll let the athlete know that idea was not great, but we'll certainly let them know that you respect them. You don't have to do it every time, but if you do it a few times, that gives a message to the athlete, you know what, I'm respected. What I say is important here. And more importantly, feedback you constructive feedback. It's the sandwich approach, which should work. And let them know honestly. Don't make up stories. Honestly, what went well. The part is what needs improvement, and of course, how it can be improved. So by getting constructive feedback, I started with things about the athlete, and you enter solutions can make that athlete feel respect, because you know that you understand that their ego can hurt. Then you are respected, you are respectable about that. So with that, I end the conversation. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to give you. So apologies for the issues with volume. I don't know what's happening today, but as sports people, we need to figure a way to make things happen. So if you have
Yeah,
any.
yep. Thanks, Sanjana, for the presentation. Yep. So we have collected one question from the CoachSG Facebook. Okay. Reaching peak performance and ensuring safety of psychological safety of the athletes can be conflicting at times. How can coaches best manage these?
I would like to hear from the coach, what is the conflicting parts? Because peak
Yeah.
performance is a situation where the athlete can be their best in every way. And psychological safety allows for the athlete to be their best during training. Because if the best during training cannot come out, it won't come out during competition. And athlete psychological safety allows for an athlete to have a higher self-confidence and higher self-efficacy, right? So that is the link. Now, is the coach who's asking the question talking about tough love? I don't know. So I need to know what aspect is the conflict. Maybe then I can.
Yeah, actually the question is just okay, it's posted on Facebook, but the coach has actually already left for some other duties. Yes,
Oh,
but
I'm
I
so sorry
suppose it may be something like, because coaches by its nature, by the nature, because okay, my interpretation of this conflict may be that because coaches by the profession, because we need to demand performance from the athlete. So in this
Yeah.
process of demanding the performance, I mean, sometimes coaches may unintentionally, or I don't know, intentionally say or do things that may compromise on that psychological safety. So I suppose that's where that conflict comes in.
Okay, there's nothing wrong at all in coaches demanding it, because if coaches do not put that pressure and demand on the athlete, then how can we expect the athlete to go through the rigor of the demands of a competition? And like I said, we are talking about competitive sports. We're not talking about recreational sport. And
Yeah,
competitive sport is about podium finishes. In
correct.
most cases, nobody remembers who got a silver, who got a bronze. How many of us remember silvers and bronzes from Olympics or a SEA Games? Hardly ever. But then the manner you do it can be very different. Now, tough love is okay. Screaming and shouting is not the way forward. But being firm is very important. And to be firm, you don't have to scream and shout. So in terms of communication, that's one example. By berating a person, belittling a person, always reminding them of how bad they are at what they're doing, if the intention is that this will work as a reverse psychology, I have some news for you. It is not working in these days. Perhaps it worked for you. The athlete population today is very different. For me, growing up, that was one of the methods too, and it worked, but it worked purely out of fear. When that was missing, I did whatever I wanted to do. So do you want things to be done purely because of fear? Now you want your athlete to, fight like a lion during competition, but you want them to behave like a rat during training. It doesn't work. There are better methods of doing it. And I'm not implying that a coach should not be firm. Of course, the coach needs to be firm. The coach is a coach for a reason. The athletes might, in today's world, believe that they know it all. Information they might have, experience they don't. You see, the coach is the leader, and there has to be only one leader in an equation. The coach is the leader, full stop. So the athlete must listen to the coach, but the manner through which the coach communicates can make it or break it. So do you want your athlete to listen to you just because of compliance and do it for the sake of doing? Or do you want your athletes to want to do it and grow further? That's the question. And mind you, this is not just about Singapore or Asia. This is literally every different nation I've worked with. And things are changing now. And things have to change, because mental illness is, I hope it doesn't become a pandemic in the sports fraternity. when, when a Michael Phelps can talk about it, when a Michael Phelps tells you, you know what, I got those medals. The first day I felt great, but after that I felt empty. Are you kidding me? You've lost your entire childhood. You've lost your entire youth to this. And I'm not blaming the coaches of the sports ecosystem. We didn't know better. That's a fact. And as a clinical psychology trained person, I do need to have certain conversations with my athletes before I can point, okay, this is impacting at a greater level. Knowing that there's no way of knowing, it's better to have the best practices so that the impact can be reduced.
Okay, thanks, Sanjana. We have another question here. Okay, for example, if is a coach empowering psychological safety if he says you have to improve or else you'll be dropped in the context of athlete podium finishers and not the developmental athlete?
That is a fact. But you can't stop the conversation there. And before saying that, the coach also has to say, the fact is this. So let's figure how we can go about doing it. But the coach should also ask the athlete, is this what you want? So when the conversation is complete, psychological safety can be taken care of.
So in a way that after saying this, the coach will have to suggest to the athlete that, yes, this is a fact, but we can still do something about this if we work together.
Yeah.
So it's by having that, the coach shows that, even though this is a fact, but I will still support you. I will still support you all the way, as in to help you to still be in the team, to still perform well.
Yeah, because when we do team selections, we have to be fair to those who are performing, you see. As a coach, the coach has to be fair. It's a dirty job, having to do team selection. It's very tough. I don't envy the coaches for that. But then that is something they need to do. So how they brief the athlete is super important. The fact is, out of the 10, there are 3 that will be selected. And those 3 will be selected based on their ability, which their performance will show. So the 10 of you, if you want this real bad, let's discuss what can we do to get you there. Again, in the circumstances they are, within what we have. Now in Singapore, we can't compare ourselves to a US in terms of some training practices. When that happens, you lose it already. Comparison doesn't help. You can't compare oranges to apples, right? So within what we have, what can we do to get you there? And let's give our best and see how far we go. So as long as the coaches take the athletes' focus to their own best performance, things are fine. So it's really how the conversation is being had.
So it ultimately boils down to how the coach communicates.
Yes, because
with each and every one of his athletes.
Like I said, the athletes might have a lot of information owing to internet these days, which most of us coaches didn't have. But that doesn't mean they know how to use it. They know everything about it. That doesn't mean they know the processes. So they're still looking to the coach. They might not openly state it, especially the developmental group, because egos are very fragile. And they themselves want to feel, they want to shine, they want to feel like know it all. And these are part, and risk-taking behavior is also very normal in adolescence. So as a coach, we need to be wary of these, aspects to an athlete. But we must have the conversation. Now, the growth of an athlete is not similar to the growth of a non-athlete. The athletes must grow faster because they're training every day, they're competing, they're being judged all the time. So the coaches will need to have mature conversations with the athlete.
Okay, thanks, Sanjana. So right now we don't have any more questions. So I guess we just move on to the feedback for this e-work.